Corruption kills much faster during war than in peacetime.
Ніж в мирний час. Тому що б не трапилось зі мною.
Whatever happens to me, Ukraine must continue to receive money and weapons because you give them to Ukrainians, not Zelensky.
А не Зеленського.
Do you think he is? Is President Zelensky a beneficiary of corruption in Ukraine? Hi, just so you know, this interview was done in Ukrainian. It's a conversation between two Ukrainians. But we have an English dubbed version and the original Ukrainian version. And you can choose which one you want to listen to by clicking the gear symbol right here. Vitali, you are probably the most famous anti-corruption activist in Ukraine. And today we are talking to you because you are accused of a crime and you could face a minimum of 5 years in prison. Can you explain what you're accused of?
I will try. I was preparing for the war. I took my family out of the country 2 weeks before the start of the war. I joined the army on the first day of the war. Together with many other Kyiv residents, we stood in line to the territorial defense, where we received weapons. In general, I have been serving for 3.5 years now. The State Bureau of Investigation thinks that out of those 3.5 years, I served improperly for 5 months. I will explain what is meant by improperly. And yes, for this, I have to be imprisoned for at least 5 years.
So you are accused of evading service.
I will explain, you can call it that way. What does it mean? After the Russians were pushed out of Kyiv Oblast and were no longer here, my unit was stationed outside of Kyiv. It did not take part in the hostilities because there were no longer any hostilities in Kyiv Oblast. The National Agency for Corruption Prevention, one of the 3 key anti-corruption agencies in Ukraine, which deals with anti-corruption policy and institutions, officially asks my commander to detach Shabunin to them. We need him. And they list what for. For example, for implementing a law on the confiscation of Russian assets, which we wrote together with the NACP and which was passed by the parliament. But implementing it requires a lot of work, advocacy, intellectual, regulatory work, and there are a number of other needs. My commander assesses the situation, makes a decision, and gives me an order to go. I, as a soldier, follow the order and arrive at the NICP. The prosecution does not dispute any of this. They have no questions about this. The NICP asked and the commander issued the order. They questioned whether the commander had the right to issue such an order, but it has nothing to do with me. There is an order, I follow it. What is the accusation? Their position is that when I came to the NACP, I didn't do anything for this 5 months. And so the money I received from the military unit, I did not receive anything from the NACP, because that's how military service works. And that was $4,500 in 5 months. So that you understand, I received it illegally because I did not do anything for the NACP.
What did you do for the NACP?
In short, there were several key blocks. The first block was the implementation of the law on the confiscation of Russian assets in Ukraine. This was important because it was a resource for the army, plus it opened the door to demand the confiscation of Russian assets in the West. We did our job. It's your turn. The second block. At the beginning of the war, the parliament allowed officials to not declare their assets, which made sense for the beginning of the war. At that moment, we began the process of adopting a law that reinstated mandatory declaration.
I think this is enough. We just need to understand. Did you work as an anti-corruption activist?
No, as one of the few experts in Ukraine who can not only come up with a concept for a law, but also give the right task to the lawyers to draft it.
As far as I understand, you're saying that you did not violate the law?
No, I did not.
You are sure about that?
I will prove it to you.
You will be proving it later in another place.
I have a case where I violated the law and confessed openly in court.
Let's talk about something else. Please tell me, as a well-known activist, did you get any preferential treatment, any special status in your place of service? The commander sent you to the NACP. This is not an option available to everyone. right? Do you think you got special treatment?
Why is it not available to everyone? Let me talk about my elite places of service. For the last 6 months, I have been working as a loader in a food warehouse. This has been my service, which, for some reason, was photographed every day and sent to the command. This is to address the elite service.
I think it's not about elitism, I think it's
About the opportunity.
yes, that you had the opportunity to continue the work you did before, and not everyone has it.
Let's split it up here. Are there servicemen in Ukraine who get detached from their units? Plenty. Are all of them sent to civilian agencies? Not all of them.
Based on how law enforcement agencies are investigating this case, what makes you say this is persecution because of your work and not simply standard law enforcement activity?
2 points. Procedural lawlessness in the case itself and circumstances surrounding this case.
What do you mean by circumstances?
Example, a search was carried out at the place of service, where I arrived the day before that. Before the start of the search, before I knew about it, my commander told me that the deputy brigade commander had called him, saying that 2 counterintelligence officers from the security service would come now and have a chat with me. This is a standard procedure, and this is true.
Is that a security check?
They check your phone number, IMEI, whether geolocation is enabled, whether Telegram is installed. Everyone uses Telegram, but nobody is supposed to. It's a normal procedure. 2 counterintelligence officers arrived. First, they have a chat with a colleague of mine from the same unit. A normal conversation? I stand by the window. I hear it. Show your phone. IMEI. This cannot be used. Next. I come in. Sit down. Me, table, and a lieutenant colonel of the security service of Ukraine. The same procedure?
Is it normal for a lieutenant colonel of the security service of Ukraine to be present for that?
I don't know. I can assume that it is normal.
What happens next?
The most interesting thing is that there is no search yet. Nothing has started. At this moment, we're at the kitchen of an almost ruined house, without a window, which is typical near the front line. An operational group of the State Bureau of Investigation storms in. Weapons, masks, helmets, stickers, they block me so that I cannot leave the table. At this moment, the Lieutenant Colonel of the Security Service of Ukraine runs off with my phone.
Was he holding it at the time?
Yes, which is a violation of everything that there is in the Criminal Procedure Code. I understand what is happening. I speak into their camera, repeating several times what just happened, for it to be recorded in the protocol. And I'm thinking, how are they going to legalize all of this? After 2.5 hours of searching, when everything that was taken from me is already on the table, a computer, another phone, a watch, I think everything was already packed in the evidence bags. Someone shouts from the yard, "There's a phone lying here near the threshold." And the head of the operational group of the State Bureau of Investigation comes into the room with what looks like my phone in his hands, unlocked. And then, for 8 or 7 hours, they filmed the contents of my phone.
Why did they need the contents of your phone? What do you think?
I have 2 assumptions. First, to understand with whom I communicate. Because, for example, they filmed not only the correspondence, but also the contexts. But if it was just for that, there would have been no need for this circus with running off with my phone. If you need evidence for an investigation, then you want to make everything as legal as possible by simply taking my phone in front of the camera, putting it in a bag, and sealing it. That's why I believe what they actually wanted was to continue a smear campaign, not just against me, but against everyone involved in anti-corruption efforts in this country. I'm expecting phantasmagoric stories to appear on Telegram channels affiliated with the President's office about me and the contents of my phone. There is no other logic.
Does the fact that they got access to your phone potentially put at risk some people, who we would call whistleblowers, some government officials who communicated with you, gave you information?
Yes, at a very serious risk.
Vitali, if this is persecution because of your work, then what work exactly?
First, I don't think this is only about me. I think that they are making an example out of me. In such an unlawful way, Zelensky, because I don't separate him and his team, for me, the president is responsible for everything, sends a clear signal to two key groups which are problematic for the political elite that wants to steal and be re-elected. Group 1, detectives, investigators, activists. If we could go after Shabunin in front of all the media in the country, then we can go after anyone, anytime, whenever we want. This is the signal to the first group. But there is another group that poses a potential threat for Zelensky closer to the elections. The military. Most of those who served in the army in the first 6 months of the war can be imprisoned. I remind you that the guns were handed out from the trucks. What kind of weapon accounting was there?
You mean there were a lot of violations that you can use to go after people?
These are formal. We still have a paper-based army where every step, every action, especially those involving weapons or personnel, must be documented on papers. If there is no paper, you can go to jail. They are targeting me under military criminal law. So this is a signal to all military personnel. Using the State Bureau of Investigation, I can go after anyone. I went after Shabunin while all the cameras of the country were filming, so I can go after you too. It's not even just about the first 6 months of the war. Anyone who works with drones in Ukraine, most of them use explosives from disassembled ammunition. That's a prison sentence. That's a sentence for those who did it, those who stood aside, and for the commanders. That's if you strictly follow the official rules and documentation. So, I believe that this is not so much about me, although it is about me too, as it is a signal to these two groups.
Why do you think that the military as a group can pose a threat to Zelensky?
Because the demand for justice among the military, especially those who are engaged in combat, is much more acute than among civilians who are not engaged in combat. For many reasons, including psychological ones, and this is an obvious fact. And that's why you need fear here. I won't be the only example. I'm just the first one, I think. But it is very illustrative. Now, a broader picture. How do this first group and I prevent those elites who want to steal? What is our function? We are the immune system. We signal the body that there is corruption. An example, 123 lawmakers registered a bill that essentially guarantees amnesty for corruption in defense procurement. We, as an expert organization, spotted that, ran a legal analysis, and communicated it to the media. The media examined our findings, verified them as they should, and communicated the problem to society. Having removed us, the political elite mistakenly thinks that the media won't notice these bills, which are often very cunning. That's why they're targeting us now. What is the problem? What is the mistake of the political elite? If there is no information from us, the media will organize their own experts. They don't need experts now because we fulfill this function. If it weren't for us, they would do it themselves. They're going after us now, and the media are next. Because the problem of informing the society about their attempted corruption must be solved. And the third, for the political elite that steals, aside from those who speak out about it, there is another problem in Ukraine. Finally, thanks to our efforts, there are those who can actually put them in jail. A deputy prime minister becoming a suspect in a case is a good example. The Anti-Corruption Bureau and Anti-Corruption Prosecutor's Office. There are dozens of cases when we, the Anti-Corruption Action Center, were the first to speak out about bills or other attempts to dismantle these anti-corruption institutions. That's why the political elite that steals needs to remove us to make it easier for them.
Do you mean that after removing you, they will try to remove the anti-corruption infrastructure?
Yes, 100%. By removing us, it will make it much easier for the political elite to dismantle the institutions that pose a threat to them. So it's us, and then either the media or anti-corruption institutions.
I understand that the president is ultimately responsible for everything that is happening. But there's an important question. Do you think that Zelensky personally gave permission to go after you?
I will say 2 points and you and the viewers will decide.
І читач визначиться. і глядач.
Do you know what has changed in the last 3 months in my communication?
Before you go into that, can you first say most likely yes or no?
Most likely yes.
Why do you think so?
Тому що
I have 2 arguments.
аргумент мій.
My argument several months ago, just recently, I changed my rhetoric.
Зовсім нещодавно я змінив свою риторику. Я
I stopped saying Yermak,
Єрмак,
Tatarov, Umerov.
Умєров,
I started saying President Zelensky and his office.
Зеленський і його офіс.
Not Defense Minister Umerov, but Zelensky's defense minister.
Міністр
Not killed the deputies of the Servant of the People Party, but the deputies of Zelensky.
So you, as an activist, started to blame Zelensky directly?
Not to blame, to focus on responsibility.
увагу на відповідальності. Бо, наприклад, якби
Because any lawlessness or any bill about corruption amnesty, even if he or his deputies didn't initiate it, he can stop it at any time.
ДБР саме побігло, то він в любому
Stop it. You're damaging the country.
зупиніться, ви шкодите країні. Він не
He didn't stop it. So yes, I think that he is fully responsible for this.
відповідальність.
And one more argument. There's a Ukrainian media outlet called Zerkalo Tizhnya. I read it all the way back in high school, when it was still in print. They published an editorial about my case, and there was a very important message.
Що за їхньою інформацією,
According to their information, Zelensky personally gave an order about this at a meeting. It's in their editorial.
And this is a well-known newspaper with very good sources.
тобто
Everyone makes mistakes.
помиляються друзі.
But I've made far more mistakes than Zerkalo Tizhny has when it comes to such serious claims.
Їх серйозних заяв.
So based on these 2 arguments, I think that Zelensky is responsible.
Зеленський відповідальний.
So you believe that President Zelensky could personally give an order, obviously an illegal one, to go after you?
If there is any conviction that I would like to be wrong about, this is the one. But I do believe in this.
I am sometimes asked about corruption in Ukraine, and when foreigners ask me about corruption in Ukraine, they often ask what President Zelensky thinks about it. And I often say that, unlike the previous presidents, what is different now, as for me, and I want to hear your opinion, is that I don't know anyone who would say that President Zelensky is a direct beneficiary of corruption. Do you think he is? Is President Zelensky a beneficiary of corruption in Ukraine?
I will answer this way. I don't know. So far, there have been no investigations, not even journalistic ones, that directly point to him as a beneficiary of corruption. There are no such investigations. There were investigations about Yanukovych. With the previous president, investigations were very close.
In the case of Poroshenko, there were investigations about his close circle, but not about him personally.
There are none about Zelensky or his close circle.
Then why would he personally protect the corrupt system from people like you?
It's impossible that he doesn't see this corruption. It's a fact that it's impossible for him not to see the obvious investigations targeting his friends and his close circle. Chernyshov, what is not clear in this case? The head of the anti-monopoly committee has been a suspect for a year, and now an indictment for illegal enrichment of 70 million hryvnias has been sent to court. What is not clear here? Now why? I will answer your question. Why is this happening?
Питання, чому так відбувається?
I think it's not about corruption, but about
Як про
he thinks it's all his.
своїм?
He doesn't understand what the problem is.
What do you mean?
Well, some minister gave the land to a company and buildings were constructed there. This is good. The fact that as a part of the deal, the minister received cheap apartments as a kickback for giving the land to this company. Well, there were no buildings, now there are. I think it's more about misunderstanding of basic institutional principles, basic principles of the rule of law.
Do I understand correctly? You are saying he sees it as just acceptable side effects of progressing fast.
I have an impression that he doesn't consider it a problem.
Навіть не з точки зору закону.
Like some ordinary evil that won't go anywhere?
Not even as evil. It seems to me that he doesn't consider corruption a problem or something wrong. Not from the point of view of the law, in general.
From the point of view of values?
Yes, you have the head of the anti-monopoly committee suspected of illegal enrichment. He explains millions in assets by saying that his parents used to sell raspberries in the past. Do you understand the schizophrenia of this story? And this person stays in office for a year. This person holds negotiations in the EU on behalf of the country. I have an impression that he simply doesn't consider it a problem.
We are talking about someone who is not only the elected leader of our country, but also, because of certain circumstances, one of the most widely supported public figures in the world, who is seen as a hero who defends his country. You are talking about this person possibly protecting the corrupt system. How is it to be an anti-corruption activist in Ukraine now and criticize the president of Ukraine, who is one of the most popular figures in the world?
Whatever happens to me, Ukraine must receive money and weapons. This is important. We, Ukrainians, know how to deal with our own politicians, but for this there must be a state. Whatever happens to me, Ukraine must continue to receive money and weapons because you give them to Ukrainians, not Zelensky. This is the most important thesis. I'm asking the West to give Ukraine weapons and money for the army regardless of what is happening in Ukraine with corruption. We are Ukrainians. We can deal with our government, whether corrupt or not. We will deal with it in the next elections. But for these elections to take place, we must preserve our state. We cannot do that without Western weapons. And we, the Anti-Corruption Action Center, repeat this message on all international platforms. We, an anti-corruption organization. Me, the one whose house was burned down, where my wife's parents nearly burned alive. Me, whose parents, including my blind mother, had grenades thrown under their apartment. All that was before the war. I have gone through a lot. But we are Ukrainians. We will figure it out. Just give us the opportunity to survive as a country.
In that case, why can't we postpone talking about corruption, as many people want to after the war?
Because it helps the enemy. It's simple math. We have limited resources. If someone buys eggs, weapons, jackets for the military at inflated prices, the army gets less of it. This means that our chances of winning are reduced. Simple math. It can be even worse. When the army receives ammunition, mines that don't work, corruption kills much faster during war than in peacetime. We have a policy at the Anti-Corruption Action Center. We only go into a public fight with the authorities, into tense communication, after all other forms of non-public communication and expert analysis have failed. During the war, we changed this policy. Now we try non-public communication twice. And when the authorities refuse to act, we have no choice. But if we remain silent, the authorities won't stop stealing. On the contrary, it motivates them to steal even more.
Traditionally, when the authorities tried to pressure activists or journalists in Ukraine, the West stood up to protect them. There were always statements from embassies, G7 representatives in Ukraine. This is not happening now. Why do Western diplomats keep silent about this case?
Next year, for us to continue to fight back, we need at least $60 billion. We need to find them in the West. It is very difficult for Western governments to take money from their taxpayers to support the Ukrainian war effort, if it's not a democratic Ukraine that is fighting against authoritarian Russia.
Демократична Україна бореться з авторитарною Росією. Тому дипломати
That is why diplomats are so careful in public, so as not to take away their government's ability to give money to Ukraine.
Щоб не забрати у урядів своїх країн можливість збирати гроші для України.
There is one problem.
Проблема. Це русські зроблять.
The Russians will do it. The information about my case is already known to everyone in Ukraine.
Всім в Україні.
Nothing stops Russians from pushing the narrative about an authoritarian Ukraine through its agents in the West, making it difficult for us to get support.
Пхати кругом зараз на Заході, ускладнюючи нам отримання грошей.
Diplomats do what they do.
Роблять так, як вони роблять.
This will not solve the problem. If I were a Russian agent, I would now make a case against Shabunin, and then I would kill me and frame the Ukrainian special services.
Щоб звинувати українські спецслужби.
Because if, God forbid, this happens, Zelensky will never prove that it was not him who did it. This is so obvious.
Це ж елементарні речі.
Don't they understand this?
Розуміють.
Vitali, don't you think that with the administration having changed in the United States, they may not be watching so closely what's happening in Ukraine? The reforms, civil society developments, and so on? Could this have affected the likelihood of receiving support from Western diplomats in your case?
It's a fact that there has been a critical reduction in the US attention to reforms, corruption, and all the democratic processes in Ukraine.
І все, демократичні процеси в Україні.
I can't assess why this happened, with what intentions. Maybe it's part of their policy. I don't know. It happened, and our government might have seen it as a signal that they can do whatever they want. I don't think that was the signal, but the Ukrainian government saw it that way.
Це був такий сигнал. Но українська
But the Americans now allow us to do whatever we want.
тепер дозволяють робити нам, що ми хочемо.
Once again, I'm sure there was no such signal, but that's how it was seen by Zelensky and Yermak. And from now, for them, there is no American deterrent.
Для них немає.
I'm not saying that there is objectively no such deterrent. I'm saying that they don't have it in their heads. And you can immediately see the difference, right, in their behavior.
I want to ask you very directly about this. Do you think that during the war, Ukraine is becoming, or risks becoming, a more authoritarian state, losing part of its democracy and freedom?
Any country at war loses part of its democracy.
Втрачає частину демократії.
It is important that this loss of democracy is only for the sake of victory in the fight against the external enemy.
З зовнішнім ворогом. Якщо суспільство
If society begins to feel that the natural reduction of democracy during wartime leads to authorities abusing power for their own interests, this poses a colossal
в
threat.
власних інтересах, це колосальна загроза.
This is a sure path to defeat. During war, authorities must be more careful with justice inside the country, 100 times more careful than before.
100 разів більше, ніж до війни.
Do you think that there is a greater demand for justice during war?
Кожного в сім'ї
In every family, someone serves or fights.
воює.
During war, Ukrainians give the most important thing to the state, the lives of their loved ones. Obviously, in return, they expect at least justice from the state.
Щонайменше справедливості.
And the greater the sacrifice, the greater the concern in every family for their relative, the stronger the demand for justice from the state.
Тим більшим є запит на справедливість у держави.
This is a question that I would not like to ask, but I have to, because our foreign audience asks about it. Among other reasons, they ask it because this is a narrative used by Russian propaganda. Russian propaganda uses the narrative that Zelensky is a dictator or can become a dictator. And a dictator is a word that frightens democratic countries. What do you think about it? Can a president become a dictator in Ukraine? After all, we have experience as Ukrainians of resisting this.
Українці точно
Ukrainians would definitely not allow any dictatorship in peacetime.
в мирний час.
It is much more difficult to do so in wartime,
Це час військовий.
for many different reasons.
But do you think Ukrainians can stop it?
During the war, I don't think so.
Не думаю.
There are no tools. During the war, a key tool, peaceful gatherings, was taken from the citizens.
Protests?
Peaceful gatherings and elections. Elections are not a form of protest. Elections are a democratic process. There is no process. You can't change those who are abusing their power. But the absence of elections, which is the right thing for Ukraine during the war, really lets the political elite loosen up. Together with the limitation of freedom, it makes the temptation even bigger. And if the political elite also lacks an understanding of institutions and potentially has issues with values, then all of this becomes a very dangerous mix.
I always think for some reason, and maybe this is some kind of strange idealism, but I instinctively think that Ukrainians have such a strong demand for freedom that it is very difficult for me to imagine, even during the war, that the history of our country could end in dictatorship. Do you think we have a particularly strong demand for freedom after centuries of what happened to our country?
There is a demand, there is definitely a demand, because we as a people have something to be proud of. Our media and their investigative departments are some of the best in the world. I know what I'm talking about. Our non-governmental organizations are super effective. We, as a society, have built state institutions which, after only 10 years of work, are now issuing suspicions to deputy prime ministers and to members of the ruling party in parliament. The FBI did not do this even after 30 years of work, but now there are no tools. This is not about desire and readiness. This is about the absence of tools. So I think that if suddenly someone wants to build authoritarianism in Ukraine during the war, they will succeed. If someone wants to, it can be the end of the country. Because then there will be elections. If suddenly someone wants to establish authoritarianism, they will never win them fairly. They will try to falsify them. There are a lot of weapons, explosives, and drones in the country. There will be no dancing on Maidan, and this can ruin the country. This is a very dangerous path.
Tell me, please, how do you think your case will end?
I don't know. If it wasn't for the war, I would have known every next step. Now there is a war, and during the war, the authorities have tools to go after those who disagree, which they never had before. This government has tools to suppress democracy and those who disagree during the war like no other government had before, including Yanukovych. So I don't know.
Is it still possible to stop? Can this decline be stopped now? And what should happen?
One word from Zelensky: stop. That is all.
What can make him say this word?
You have to ask him. I hope the desire to save the country.
If you could talk to him now, if President Zelensky invited you to a meeting, what would you tell him?
If he wants to shut me up, there are 100 legal ways to do it without all this. I am a serviceman, just 30 kilometers from the front line. There are 100 legal ways to do it without damaging the country. Those who advised him to handle it this way are enemies to him and the country. Enemies.
Do you know who it was?
No.
Do you have assumptions?
There aren't many people around the president whom he would have listened to or would have entrusted with this. I can assume that it would not have worked without Tatarov. But there is also Yermak and his prosecutor. I don't want to speculate with names. The fact is, if Zelensky says to stop, not just in my case, but in this broader rollback, the decline can be stopped. Everything would stop immediately.
Thank you so much for watching this interview. Covering topics like corruption in Ukraine during war is not really easy. There's a lot of nuances, and we, working for a foreign audience, need to be conscious and careful and do the job of adding all the necessary context and explaining what is really happening. I'm happy that we had this opportunity to sit down with Vitaliy Shabunin, who is the best-known anti-corruption activist in Ukraine. If you believe that it is important to cover things like corruption, power abuse, and to uphold the core function of journalism, which is to keep the power accountable. If you believe in it, like we believe in it, please consider becoming a member of the Kyiv Independent and supporting our work and helping us do more interviews and coverage like this. There are 20,000 people supporting us now, and the more we have, the more we can do. Thank you for standing with us.